Welcome to Facing the Moment, brought to you by the Foundation for Self-Leadership. In these episodes, we will address various crises and focus on how to navigate them with abundant fortitude and a bit of hope. As we discuss relevant observations together, we will identify meaningful actions that will generate valuable insights. You can download all episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
I welcome our listeners to this episode of Facing the Moment. Today we'll be discussing grief. Grief is often talked about as an experience that follows the death of a loved one. Every one of us goes through it at various points in our lives. Here we'll explore that and try to take a broader view of grief. Yes, grieving the loss of a family member or friend may be most challenging, yet also taxing. Is grieving the loss of a relationship, of an important job for no cause or fault of our own, loss of safety, stability, or security, loss of trust in critical service institutions or systems around us that we rely on, even loss of decency that may have held our communities together, or loss of visions for a better future that we held dear. Many of us carry multiple layers of loss at once, personal and professional, individual or collective, old wounds or freshly triggered ones. What we intend to do in this conversation today is to understand grief, to examine what is often misunderstood about grief, and to discuss how to move with it rather than be trapped by it. It is not about overcoming it. We probably always carry it with us in some fashion. Rather, it is about how to live with it and show up anyway. So how do we do that? How do we navigate grief following loss? How do we trust that we will be able to endure it? And what can we do about it to come out eventually whole on the other side? To help me address these challenging questions, I'm grateful and privileged to be joined by Ty Cutner, who has dealt with quite a few losses himself. Thank you for joining me, Ty.
Thanks for having me.
Ty Cutner is the founder of Well-Dressed Academy and an IFS-trained coach working with men, young adults, and families at the intersection of personal healing, leadership, and culture. Through his coaching, trainings, and programs, Ty has supported more than 4,000 individuals. Very impressive, including extensive work with parents, schools, and community organizations. After navigating his own turning point marked by career stagnation, grief, and relationship betrayal, Ty committed to understanding the inner systems that shape how we lead, love, and respond to adversity. He has served as a consultant to the IFS Institute during the redesign of its coaching program. He was an IFS Leadership Fellow sponsored by the Foundation, and we were very pleased to have him as a fellow. And he later served on an advisory team helping guide its next phase of growth, and we're grateful for that. Today, Ty is building workshops, training, and media projects focused on helping people and families become more self-led and emotionally resilient. Thank you, Ty. What else would you like to share about yourself that would be relevant to our conversation today?
Well, I'm also on a mission to heal the world. In 10 or 15 years, there'll be no more wars, crime, racism. It'll be a thing of the past. Just like smoking on airplanes is a thing of the past, that's how we're going to look at killing each other, a thing of the past.
I appreciate your ambitious vision, your far-reaching and inspiring vision. I'm with you on this journey, and I believe many of us around this world would also be. So let's face the moment together. And let me tell our listeners at the outset that what you hear may unearth uneasy memories or difficult feelings for you. If so, please step away from the podcast, take a few deep breaths, and remind yourself that you have what it takes to regain your balance and composure. You can always come back and listen later. So let's get started, Ty. I'd like to start with your own personal experience. When we mention the word grief, What comes up for you?
Yeah. So for me, it is like this sense of sadness and unshakable sadness and feelings of loss and abandonment, especially around people that you care about. That's what I hear when I hear grief.
Mm-hmm. You've told me earlier that you experienced significant losses in your life. Maybe you can share more now if you're comfortable. How did you face these losses, and how did they shape how you would deal with grief today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my life started with a loss. My father was killed before I was born. And my mom poured into me that I was gifted, talented, the golden child of the family, but she passed when I was 15 in the 10th grade. And when that happened, I lost a part of me. And the 90s were rough for my family. I lost my mom, my aunt, two of my uncles, in a span of 6 years. It was just like, and I'm still a kid, and that means that not only am I losing these family members, but my cousins are also losing their parents at the same time, and we're growing up, becoming adults without parents, and so that was pretty challenging, but it wasn't until IFS that I was able to have a new relationship with grief. And so and once that happened, I was like, wow, I bet you the rest of the world doesn't realize this is how our mind is working, how grief is working. And that's the reason why I was like, okay, I'm going to give this to everybody. And if I gave it to everybody, then the world would be a healed place.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to fall very short when I say I'm sorry for your losses. And I appreciate the fact that you tried to deal with them differently over time, and you're looking for ways to do that. I'm curious, though, what sorts of support were missing for you during these experiences? In retrospect, that is, what would you have liked to see available to you?
Yeah, that's funny. When I did my healing with IFS, we call it unburdening, right? And so my second session with Richard Schwartz, the founder of the IFS model, I was unburdening that 15-year-old part. And in IFS, one of the healing steps is a do-over. And so I asked that part, what did they want to happen when mom passed away? Now, during that time, my parts felt like the only way for us to get over mom passing is if she came back to life. And we know that's not possible. So now we're stuck with this pain forever. So let's just move on. Let's just keep on going, So I asked that part, what did you want when mom passed away? And he said, I wanted somebody to come see me. So that they see me, they see that I'm gifted and talented. They'll be my cheerleader the way my mom was. There was certain aspects and things that my mom only she did. And at 15, that's what I wanted. But no one did that. No one came to me. No one was able to see me.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that session, I was like, well, I can see you now. I can see you and I could be here for you now. I've spoken to family members about those times as I share my healing with my family and how I've been able to heal. And they recount what was happening with them during that time as well. Because I felt like people just moved on with their life, and I'm the one stuck with it. But they were all grieving in their own corners, and they were trying to move on in a similar way because my mom was a big person in many people's lives. And so because we don't understand grief properly and because we have certain ways in our culture in which we deal with it, a lot of times we isolate, which is the opposite of what we should be doing when it comes to grief. We should be coming together. And I believe that's the way for us to reconnect to those lost ones.
Yeah, thank you for these insights. And I'm sorry that you had such difficult experiences, but often when we are aware of these difficult experiences and when we choose to overcome them, we often find a way. And I just want to tell our listeners, if they're not familiar with IFS, it's a form of self-empowering therapy that opens up our hearts to compassion and courage and other qualities that we all possess within us. And we embrace how our whole system, all our aspects, and understand that they're there to serve us. And that allows us to deal with the anger and fear and pain and other emotions we experience. But beyond just the therapy piece, this model gives us a paradigm for living, a practice for better living and interacting with others. So let me ask you about where you are today. So when a new loss occurs, and it is expected that such things happen in life, and hopefully they won't happen as severely for you. But when a new loss occurs, and when we cannot stop losses from coming into our lives, how does that new loss reactivate earlier ones? In other words, what feeling does that new loss activate in you, for example? Where do you feel it in your body? And what do you tell yourself about it?
Yeah, so I actually had a new loss recently. My godmother passed away in November. But before I go into that, because I'm going to be using a lot of IFS language, because I speak in IFS language in my normal speak. So I want to explain it in the way that I explain it, so that when I'm speaking about it, people can kind of get it.
Yes, please
So for
do.
me, the way that I explain IFS is the main purpose and premise of IFS that's very important for us is this awareness that we're a multiplicity. So physically we have one body, but mentally our mind is broken up into parts. We call it parts in IFS, right? So these parts represent the voices we hear, the emotions we have, the voices we speak with or speak from, and these parts are not all the same. They sound the same in our heads, but they're different ages. They have different experiences. Some of our parts like each other. Some of our parts dislike each other. They behave like a family, which is why it's called internal family systems. In addition to the parts, there's a self. And the self never gets hurt, doesn't get damaged, is undamageable. And there's a relationship between the self and the parts that heals the wounds of the parts. But because us humans don't realize we have parts, we're often being led by our parts. We call that blended, right? So a part of you gets down over the loss, you blend it with that down part of you, right? But having this new awareness that we have parts, we can get some space from the part that has the grief, and we can give that part the attention. So like when I had that session with my 15-year-old part, I was able to recognize that I wasn't the one that was in grief. Part of me was. And when I was able to go back and connect to that part, I was able to retrieve from that grief so it can be in my current life, And so I recently had my godmother pass away, and this may have been one of the most impactful passings since having an IFS awareness in the way that I have. And she was sick, and she was one of the people that was like my cheerleader, similar to my mom. So even when, it was like a couple of Thanksgivings ago, it was all the family was at the house, and she pulled me aside and she's like, Tyron, I'm going to go and I want you to introduce yourself to the family. I know they know you, but they don't know Ty Cutner. So I want you to introduce yourself and what you're doing in the world to them. I'm like, all right, cool. Because, I got the audio book came out, and every time I do a workshop or a podcast, she'll listen to it. She'll share it to the family. So she turned the music down. Turn the music down. Come in here. Tell everybody come in the room here. All right, go ahead, Tyron. Right. And so then I go and I tell everybody who I am. Like, I'm on a mission to heal the world. And that's how I introduce myself, whether it's on the podcast or if you meet me in a grocery store. Right. And so after I'm sharing all the tools and, IFS and how it works and how it worked for me, they're like, wow. Yeah, and then we start having these different conversations, right? They start telling me about things they're going through. And so when she was sick. And so I knew that this was coming. I knew that this, it would happen. And so when she passed, the day when the news hit, I was just very introspective of how my parts are responding to this. Who's grieving the most? Which parts of me? What are the memories they're thinking about? What is the loss that they feel like they don't have anymore because she's not here anymore, right? But also, there was also this thought of connecting to her, because when she passed, it was like my parts started to remember her whole life and her role in my life all this time, from being a kid. I remember her teaching me how to read, like all these types of things, right? And so the funeral came, the burial came, the tears came, when Thanksgiving came, it was like, there's a loss now, because this is the time when I'm usually with family in that way. My mom passed also in November, in 1996. And so that was a rough time usually. But this time it was like I had more awareness of what was happening. When I wanted to be sad, or when those parts wanted to grieve and cry, we was like, okay, come on out. Come on out and shed your tears, I'm here with you. And we was able to like really experience it. And it was like a process. In the past, parts of me would have wanted to move on. Let's get back to being normal. Let's get back to not being sad anymore. But with this awareness, I told those parts, keep the car running, but hold on a second. We'll be back in a few. And let's spend some time grieving, and I enjoyed it. It was an enjoyment coming from this grief, this crying, because it wasn't being stuck. It wasn't being like in the past, I would push it aside. Now I'm stuck with the grief versus actually processing it.
Yeah, it seems to me a recognition that you're going to get through this, and it's normal, and it's a part of honoring the memory and honoring the experience you've had with the other person, and figuring out a way to keep them alive within you. And the adult self of you has matured because of that access to that wisdom that you carry, it seems. So clearly your understanding has evolved as you have aged and taken on new public-facing responsibilities. I'm wondering if, as you engage with others, things also have shifted in you. New insights have come along, because it's one thing to grieve for ourselves. It's another thing to be with the other when they grieve. What can you share about the evolution of your thinking? And it's not just thinking, because it's not only a heady stuff, right? It's more like a heartfelt stuff, maybe a soulful experience as well. What can you say about how you engage with others around this topic?
Yeah, so the beautiful thing about being a coach versus with IFS versus being a therapist with IFS is that I use IFS in my life way before I learned the model. And it helped me. So when I went into train, I went in training with, okay, that's why I work. Oh, that's what's happening. Oh, I can't wait to give this to so-and-so. I came in with people in mind, as if I was coming in here getting something good so I can bring it back to y'all, right? And everything that I do, I get better at my things because I try it on other people. When I do things for myself or use tools on myself, I get a good portion of it. But once I get to do it for other people, now I get to see a bigger picture, because I can see it outside of myself. So the more and more that I give the tools that I use to other people, the better I get at it myself, And so I was just on a call last week. It was a grief call. It was the second one that I did. I'm connected in certain spaces like the 12-step community, and there was a branch of that. There was a grief call that happens on the what happens every Saturday, but on the fifth Saturday, my friend who's the speaker host got me on the call. In November, we did the call. And this is literally my godmother passed, the funeral, the burial was Saturday. The very next Saturday, I'm doing this call, right? And so I'm actively in grieving while I'm having this grief call. And there were like 60 people on the call. The call is supposed to be for an hour and a half. Ends up going for 3 hours, because after I speak, people asking a lot of questions, and the answers that I'm giving them is giving them relief, because many people get stuck. They get stuck with the grief. And when we get stuck with the grief, it's almost like we can't remember that person's life. We can only remember the end of their life. It's like if every movie you only remember, oh, the person died at the end. Oh, the bank robber got away. If that's all you remember, you don't remember the setup of the movie, you don't remember the good times, right? Then we lose it out, right? And so because I'm able to help people walk through it, it gives them so much feeling of healing. And that's when they can start to reconnect to their lost ones. Because even when I was going through the grief of my godmother, it was this sense that she was almost impatient. Because every time I would talk about her, I would see her name pop up somewhere. I was in Philadelphia. One of my clients called me. I was like, yeah, I'm taking it easy. My godmother passed away. While I'm talking to him, I see on Broad Street is like the Lorraine something hotel. Her middle name is Lorraine. Now, I've passed that hotel many times, but it wasn't until I look up, Lorraine, wait a minute. And so I'm thinking that's her getting my attention. I'm like, I got you. Her name is Leslie, right? I'm like, I'm going to get with you. But right now, let me just go do my press. I hear you. I know you reaching out. I know, because she knew, I told her, I could connect to my mom in ways I couldn't before. And so could you. Now, we didn't get around to that before she passed. I gave her a session, and we did do a lot of parts talk. But I felt like she was trying to connect to me. And I told her, I got you. I'll be with you in a few bits. Let me just get through some of this grieving. Some of my very young parts are still sad, and I kind of want to be with them while they're being sad.
Yes, thank you. That's certainly very meaningful to hear. Very touching. So if you don't mind, let's go back to what may be helpful and what may not be helpful. Are there well-meaning reactions to grief that you've observed that could make it much harder to navigate?
Yeah, I think the idea of us trying to get back to normal too fast, the idea of trying to be strong in front of folks, I think that the best response to many of our emotional issues is family, community. When I on a mission to heal the world, that is what I'm doing. I'm healing the families of the world, and the family system is the support for all of our emotional issues, depression, anger, jealousy. If you have somebody to support you and give you a hug, like that's the real cure for a lot of these things. But in our fast world, we have to get back to work. We have to look normal to the outside world. We have to feel the need to be accepted. We do all those things, and that bypasses or exiles. That's when we push a part away and we try to remain normal. That's what I did to my 15-year-old part. I exiled him because I was the funny, cool, smart kid. And when I was 15 and 10th grade, not the sad kid with no parents. So that part of me couldn't go to school being sad because where am I going to go to be normal? And so we do that a lot with things that we're going through. So I think, try to get back to normal too fast. Everything's going to be all right. That type of language, it really tries to get us to this finish line of getting over it. And that's not really a finish line we should be trying to get to.
Yeah, certainly not too soon. Yes. So from what you observed and from your experiences, Ty, is it possible to stay present in grief without being overconsumed by it or drowning in it? Especially, like you just said, it might take us a while to get there.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I teach my clients is you want to use these tools before you go into a storm. Before things get heavy, like a fire drill. Like that's one of the tools in the IFS, fire drill, right? And the reason why the fire drill is so effective is because it allows you to put yourself in the heat of the moment before you actually are in the heat of the moment. So if you're using these tools just for regular interactions with yourself, what should I eat for dinner today? Let me part map that. Where should I go on family vacation? What part of me want to do? If you use to have that awareness before you go into heavy things, when you get into something heavy, you use the same tools. You have the awareness. So for me, it was almost and I say this often too, I look forward to challenges in my life because then I get to bring my whole internal family involved. Come on, y'all, I need your help right now. Who's the one that's crying? Who's down? Come on over here. I got your back,
Yeah. And so all of ties, you mean? That's enjoyable. What you mean. All of ties. All of you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found out it's more than just Ty in here. And that's what, we're going to talk about that, but it's more than just Ty here. The more that you know, the more that you're able to look inside yourself. And that's what we're not taught in our society. That's the reason why the world the way it is now. Our world is a reflection. The way that the planet is, the way that the storms are happening is a reflection of our internal dysfunction. Mm-hmm. We're playing it out externally. So if we have internal harmony, then we can play it out externally. And I have that, right? And so because I have it, when I'm faced with a challenge, I take a break. I'm like, all right, I need to sit with myself. So when the news hits me, I'm like, okay, let me pay attention to what's happening. Let me be present with what's going on. There's a part that is grieving right now. Okay, let that part breathe. And what I do is when we get stuck in it, we call that blended. So we get blended with a part that is, feeling down, and then we feel down and we can't really shake it. But because I have unblending techniques that I do even when I'm not in a heavy moment, if I need to unblend when I'm in a heavy moment, I'll give that same technique a shot. And that technique works even when I am in a moment like that. And so during the Thanksgiving Day, I woke up feeling down, and I was in Philadelphia. My girlfriend lives in Philadelphia. And so I'm down, and I just noticed myself is down all day. And I'm like, okay, I feel that. I'm not going to try to shake it. And when I went to go get some groceries, I'm by myself, I'm driving, and I feel the grief, and I'm walking with my head down. I could just feel it on me. But then when I was in the grocery store, I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can unblend from this part real quick. And I do one of my little techniques that I do to unblend. And as I'm unblending, I'm feeling the shift happen. I'm feeling my body rise up. I'm feeling my head rise up slowly. I'm feeling my thoughts. New thoughts are coming in, not thoughts of grief. New thoughts are coming in like, okay, I am unblending. I'm in the process of unblending. Then I said, okay, we can blend again if we want to. And I go back and I blend back to the grief. Just to show myself that I have control over this and I can allow myself to grieve when I want and I can unblend if I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And that sense of, and it's like a sense of safety and trust internally for me that I won't get stuck with this. And that's what I share to the world. That's what I share to my family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a sense of inner leadership that you're able to lead these various aspects of you when they start dominating or taking over. And you tell them, listen, I know what you're doing. Allow me to decide when you should take over and when you shouldn't. And then you can then plan all that in a meaningful way. So how do I take this for another person? Because I need to know how to be there for someone who is grieving. Words do not always or ever help the other person that I'm attempting to help, right? The words might help me more than they're helping the other person. Yet the moment is about the other person. So are there small acts or offerings that you think one should consider to be more helpful to the other during the grieving period, but not only early on, much more critically later in the process? What can people do for each other in these situations that, in your experience, would be helpful?
Yes. Much of what I do is the way that I am with myself and what works for me is a blueprint for how to be with other people, right? So I know what works for my parts when they're grieving. I try that with other people, right? And so what I found is being there for the person, allowing them to speak, being curious, right? Having that compassion, and truly being there for them. Now, the only way that that can truly happen is that you are there for your parts first, or else they'll jump and get in the way of things, right? When a person talk about their grieving, you talk about your grieving because that part of you is speaking, right? But if you was to interact with that part first, you have more space to be there with other people, and just being able to share that with them. How are you feeling? What do you need? What's been going on? Just being there for them in that way, allowing that part, because that's what's happening when you're speaking to a person who's grieving, you're speaking to parts of them that's grieving. In the same way that you work with your own parts of the grieving, it's the same way you work with another person's parts who are grieving, And so really being there for them when somebody's blended or their parts are grieving in that way, they just want to be heard. A lot of times they want to feel like they're not alone. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything, just be there. Let them see that you're there with them. Give them a hug. Be around them. What do you need? You need me to come cook dinner? You need me to send dinner? What is it that you want? And having that, especially during the times afterwards. So it's been months that my godmother passed, and I'm more of a second wave. I'm not really the first wave that you sit in. I'm not the one that you sit in right when a disaster hits. I'm more of a second wave because I need my time to get my space together so I can be there. But I'm second wave. So now we're starting to issue into the second wave of things. And so now I'm like reaching out to my family. I'm like, okay, how's things now? Because I know for me, when my mom passed after a few months, I'm thinking everybody had moved on and I'm still stuck. I'm lagging behind when it comes to this.
Sure.
But they were still grieving. I just didn't know that because the funeral and all that stuff was over. So everybody had to go back to work or whatever they was doing. But I know that's not the case emotionally. So I'll come in the second wave and say, okay, how has it been? How have you been these last few months? What do you need? What will be helpful for you? Do you know what will be helpful for you? Let's ask inside. What will be helpful? Yeah. And let's see what comes up. And that's how I think that's the best way.
Yeah, you shared a lot of good ideas that hopefully our listeners will hook onto and start emulating, because we forget that it's not the first month or 2 or 3 that are important. At times it takes years before someone is able to live with it, right? So let's broaden the conversation a bit, Ty. You've done a lot of work with other folks, men in particular. So there's this notion, maybe misplaced, of the need to maintain strength and focus. There's dignity and pride, right? People want to survive. They don't like to shed tears in public. How do these beliefs interfere or influence the grieving experience?
hmm Yeah, I mean that's the reason why I exiled my 15-year-old part, because it was the parts of me that was funny, that was like, well, if we're sad, being funny and laughing and sad don't mix, so we can't be sad and laughing. And to that part of me, laughing and joking was close to happiness. So that's that part's reason for exiling the part. The part of me that was smart and popular, those parts didn't want to now be popular for something that was bad in life. Because if people knew my mom was passed, everybody would know instantly, because a lot of people knew me. So then I'm going to get all these well wishes from people, and to those people, they think that they're helping me out. But what they're doing is reminding me. Every hug would make me tear up. Every I'm sorry to hear that would make me more emotional, right? And that's not what my other parts wanted. So that's the reason why they pushed them aside. So it's those feelings that would stop from being able to grieve. I didn't know what was happening at that time. I was just trying to, be normal, be accepted to the outside world, which is what most of us do. You know, Now I know, okay, if there's parts of me that are grieving, the parts that want to move on, I'll ask those parts to give me some space. If a person is trying to get me to move on, I'll ask that person to give me some time, right? And I know what's best for me. And I think that's the one thing about us humans, is that we don't know ourselves enough. We don't spend enough time with ourselves. We don't spend enough time looking inside ourselves. We're not given the tools readily to how to look inside and see who we truly are internally, right? And so once we have more awareness of that, we can do different things. And that's the reason why when things like that come up for me, it's like, okay, now how would I use this new awareness to something that I've been through so many times? People in my life have passed so many times. With this new awareness, how can this be different? I'm looking forward to seeing how it can be different, and anything that I can do, so can you. And that's what makes me a coach. I coach you through the same path that I went through, and so that's what's been helpful for me.
So I would like an understanding of what grief is, and our imagined view of the world, maybe as an illusion that we have to be stoic. That really gets in the way, because all it does, in a way, it defers it, it suppresses it, and then it explodes like a beach ball that you push under the water and then let go, and it comes to the surface with all sorts of issues. And this, as you know, gives rise to pain and the dependency on other things, just to extinguish the pain. So how about young adults? And you've worked with quite a few. What types of losses, maybe beyond the personal, do they talk about today? How might you suggest they navigate some of those?
Yeah, so my son is now 16, and he's like a therapist in his friend group because he knows IFS, and I speak, like I said, I speak IFS all the time. I always speak in parts work. Anytime something happened between him and I, we use in part work to navigate that. And so, and then I coach kids, right? I have workshops in schools and high school right now. And what they're going through is many of them are isolated from their own feelings of loss. And that loss can simply be a loss of a friendship. They don't often know how to repair friendships. So if somebody says something they don't like, or somebody did something that they don't understand, they'll push that friend away. Now, the part of them that's pushing that friend away, a protective part is pushing that friend away. Other parts still likes that friend, still want to be around that friend. And now we push that person away, but we don't have nobody now. Right. And so there's this polarization that can take place where we have one part that's like, no, I gotta protect myself from this person. And I have another part that really missed the person, and this is happening. When I did the grief call last week, people were saying that they lost people to death, but some were saying that they just don't speak to their family anymore. They don't speak to their siblings anymore. And there's some loss around that, but no one gives them the tools to repair that relationship. Well, I'm not going to call first. They're not going to answer my phone anyway. They're the ones who did wrong. They should know better, right? It's like we have that, and then time just goes on. And then we are stuck for years. Matter of fact, my godmother, before she passed, she has a friend of hers, and I was like, when the last time you spoke to her? And she was like, well, I ain't spoke to her in years, and she should call me. She's mad at me for so and so. And I was like, well, why don't you just call her? She was like, and say what? I was like, and say, hey, how you been? It's been a while. How's the kids? And she was like, oh, that was easy. I was like, yes. But when we look at it from that part of us, from one part, we can't see other options. We can only see what that part sees, right? And so that's the value of being able to unblend and see bigger options. And because I give myself and I give my life and I share my stories in my own life, I walk you through how you can do it for real, and it makes it easier for people to walk down that same path. And all of us, we need each other. That's why we're on this planet, with each other, for each other. That's how it's supposed to be, family, And so how can we get back to that? And so for like the young kids, they go through things like that, and the parents don't often know how to interact or know how to look at the kids, and the kids now are with their phones in their face the whole time, so they don't feel their emotions, they don't notice them until it's too late or until it is on top of them, like you mentioned. And that's the reason why I come in and I share my story. I give them some language around it.
Yes, thank you. Very, very appropriate to the moment. And you mentioned parents, and I want to talk about the moment. And I'm thinking about Latino parents or immigrant parents, to be more specific. And you've interacted with parents. What can you tell us about the effect of displacement, uncertainty, fear, anxiety in these communities when it comes to grief? Because they're grieving what they might end up losing. They're grieving even beforehand, in advance, what might come their way. Those experiences alone might create a sense of grief across the community and the loss of community and togetherness that you just talked about. What can you tell us about their experience?
Yes, there's a lot of grief going on in the Spanish community. The workshop that I do, the school that I work with is like majority Spanish speaking families, and many of them are first generation. And one of the biggest things that they lose is their culture. They may come from the Dominican Republic, for example, and they may come into a neighborhood that has a lot of Dominican people, but because they're in a different place, their culture and their standards and their rules and how they want to live, their kids are now in this new culture. And so they start to lose, their kids don't have those meanings behind their actions, right? Whereas the parents that come from this country, they have those rules in place because they came from a different time. Mm-hmm. And they had to do things in a different way. And they come here and their kids are more free. Their kids are hanging out with people that the parents don't know of, so they feel like they're losing their kids. And they're losing their kids in a strange new world, and it was like, I had them, they were with me, they were just my little baby, because that's how many of the mothers, they see their kids as babies still, or at least they see that part of them. And their kids are now in high school and they're getting older, and so that's happening. There's stuff with the immigration, there's fears around that. There's stuff around how do we discipline our kids? How do we keep them in the house? How do we keep them connected to us? There's no language around any of that. There's no tools. No one's giving them tools. So when I come in and do a parent workshop, it's so welcome, because like finally somebody helps us out. We all going through the same issues. All of us, right? If one person could get a leg up on some of this, help the rest of us out. That's what I do. I'm like, all right, I got a 16-year-old. It's not perfect. We go through stuff together. Here's how we able to navigate it. Here's what we do. We have some parents like, I only know how to either let them do what they want to do or I punish them. Those are the only two options I know of. They don't know of any other options. And so I come in and I bring those other options. And my son loves it. He loves to come into class too, to share what we go through, because his friends are the kids, and if his friends are going through stuff at home, that's going to impact their friend group. Some friend don't want to go home, don't want to get off the phone, don't want to stop playing the game. So now he got to play the game. Now he can't go home. Now he got to stay up late. Right. And so it's like, we have to share with everyone that has tools to help us through things. That's what I'm all about. And regardless of your culture, regardless of your country, regardless of your skin color, we all one big family on this planet. That's how I see it.
Well, thank you for this invitation for us to look after each other and remember that we're sharing one future in some ways, and we're sharing the same resources around us. Not everybody gets the resources equally, but they're there, they're available, and we need to be there and stand up for each other. And thank you for doing it yourself. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. I want to go back and talk briefly about the stages of grief, because it's been common to talk about the Kubler-Ross framework, right? The 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And now psychologists talk about a 6th stage, finding meaning, and was proposed by Kessler. And it's about finding a way to live with the loss and move forward in life with purpose and without deep pain. I'm very intrigued by the 6th stage. And like you said earlier, we shouldn't rush to get there. But clearly, with your experience, you've tasted it. I'd like to hear about how what you've experienced and what you share with others align with this view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when my mom passed, I was stuck in a sense of grief. There was some disbelief. It was like, how can this happen to me? I'm like Tyron. I'm like good kid and all that. How can this happen to me? It's just not happening, So there was a lot of that. Once I had the unburdening, and this is like literally 20 something years after my mom passed, there came a sense of purpose, because now before that unburdening, I couldn't talk about her. I couldn't tell stories about her. I have family videos of myself and my family and her when I was young. I couldn't watch those videos, right? Once I had the unburdening, I can now watch those videos. I can now connect to her. I can now, tell stories about her. And then one day I actually really connected to her, right? I was having a session with someone, many of the people that I have sessions with are, especially in that time, were men, majority white men with my clients. And so after the session was over, because one of the clients got on and he said his friend just passed away and he was grieving over that. And during that session, I helped him unblend from the part of him that felt like he wasn't there for his friend. Because the last time his friend called him, he was like, I'll call you back. And that was the last time. He didn't get a chance to call his friend back, And so I helped him unblend from that part, and then recognize that how he can be there for his friend's family. His friend has a wife and, kids. He could be there from that. And that helped him kind of have a new awareness. Mm-hmm. And so after the session was over, and anyone who does IFS practitioners, those who do it well, your parts take a step back during a session with other people. So that more selfish presence. So it's not about your opinions or what your beliefs are. So before I go into a session, I ask all my parts to give me some space. But right after the session is over is when they can come on. That's when they can talk again. As soon as that session was over, I heard this part of me say, wow, Tyron, you got such a big heart for that man. You don't even know him like that. Right? And then I respond back and I said, that's because my mom had a big heart. And I was like, wait a minute. That sounds like my mom talking to me just now, because it said Tyron. Right? And so I have a little ritual that I do, and it involves an eye mask and a certain playlist. And I did that ritual. And in that period of time, I'm hearing what sounds like my mom bragging about me, because that's what she would do. She would brag about me. She was like, you see, Tyron, he was able to put that whole dresser together. I don't even think he read the instructions, right? And I'm like 8, right? And so I heard her, I heard that conversation happening, which sounds like her talking to my father, who I never met. And when this is happening, when I came to that awareness that was my mom, tears start coming out my eyes, right? And then laughter followed after that. And this happened in a matter of 15 minutes, happened 3 or 4 times. When I came out of it, I was like, I got to journal this. So I'm still having the conversation. And then I look up and I was like, wait a minute. A part of me is my mom. And then I heard the voice say, finally, you can hear me. I've been trying to get your attention all this time. How could I ever leave you? I'm always going to be a part of you. Tears. And ever since then, my mom has been with me. Right. And so there is that meaning, right? But I think there's a 7th step, and that's reconnection. Mm-hmm. Like you can reconnect. And so the way that I see it now is Because I can hear my mom and connect to her, I can now tell stories about her. I can also tell her stories about how, like, why do I believe I can heal the world? Where did that belief come from? Right? I'm a black man living in New York City. How am I going to do that? That belief happened from what I was given as a child. It's kid parts of me. It's not an activist who wants to heal the world. It's not an entrepreneur. It's a child who knows I'm an adult and knows what I'm doing. He's like, well, what if we did this? And what if we did that? And what if we did this? He has a big imagination because children still have big imaginations, whereas adults, their imaginations have been living it by life and responsibilities, right? And so that big imagination is in me. And so now I could tell my stories. And I have a series of children books that I'm going to be producing. And in these children books going to be the seed for cartoons. And when these cartoons come out, I'm going to be able to recreate my mom. You're going to be able to see my mom and the interactions that I had with her. And I'm going to have her voice because I have copies of her voice. So I get to, in essence, bring her back to life so that the rest of the world can experience what I experienced when I interacted with her. That's something that can happen when we get to certain phases of grief. And I believe there's another phase even after the meaning is reconnection.
Yes, beautiful. Beautifully said. I mean, listeners cannot see my face, perhaps. I'm smiling and really moved by your story. It's nice to have your mom as a true part of you and engage with you. If you don't mind, I'd like to spend the next few minutes talking about community grieving, right? I mean, looking at the largest pressing issues we see in our world today: racial, ethnic prejudice, systemic racism, economic challenges, political turmoil, unpredictable future, severe weather storms. How do these compound personal grief? And what perspective might you offer to help us all deal with these overwhelming pressures?
Yeah. The world is a harsh place. It's a harsh place even if we wasn't fighting each other. It's even harsher when we are fighting with each other. I look at how we are, like, I'm living here in New York City for the past 2 weeks. It's been in the 20s, sometimes single digits for the past 2 weeks. This reminds me of how I was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I feel like I think we all think that, us adults, we think when I was younger, it was so much colder. I had to walk 3 miles to school, right? We exaggerate, but that's how it feels now. But when I'm in my workshop with the kids, I tell them, I'm like, we're not supposed to be able to survive in 21-degree weather. Why are we able to? It's our collective community that allowed us to create indoor plumbing and indoor heating and centralized air, right? We were able to come together as a community, as a species, as a group to build these things to allow us to fly, to allow us to communicate how we are on this camera right now, right? And so when we're going through things in the outside world, it's our collective connection to each other that allows us to get through it. That's what makes us. That's how we're supposed to navigate these challenges. And so I'm in several places where, because of what I do, I connect to other people who are on similar paths or want to make changes to the world. And oftentimes the way they see the change that needs to happen, it creates this us and them mentality, right? And I feel like every movement is a us and them. With my movement, there is no us and them because there is no us and them on this planet. It's only us. There's not different countries, our country, their country. No, it's just us here. That's all made up. The races, that's all made up. The groups that we have is all the borders, that's all our making. We made that up. And then we turn that into this place where we divide from each other. But that's why we have these problems, because we're divided, And so the first place we have to come together is internally, right? We can't convince anyone of these things. And I have these conversations with folks and like, no, we got to eliminate this group. If we eliminate them, then there'll be no problems. I was like, well, if you eliminate them, now you're doing the same thing that they're doing. And then you eliminate them and you're going to now you have to limit every time there's a problem, you have to eliminate it. So you're going to have to keep eliminating new people. That's a failure strategy. That's the reason why our weapons are so advanced now. We got weapons that can obliterate whole cities trying to eliminate, And so I'm like, there's another way of doing that. But the first thing we have to do is we have to recognize, how do we get harmony internally? because there's no weapons inside your mind. There's no guns or bombs. Once you do that internally, you have a blueprint of how to do it externally. And because I've done it enough, I can now spread it to other people. I could be in it. You could speak to me for 5 minutes. One day I was I was going to California, and I was on a plane. I was getting on the plane, and I was going through the check, and there was 2 lines. So the security person was telling us, okay, this group goes that way, and the other group goes another way, right? So one group is going right on a line, and the other group has to go through this wind up maze to get online, right? So they put me in a group with the maze. So like 4 people in front of me going through this maze. We go through the maze and we end up right in the same exact place that the other group was going on. We didn't have to walk that maze. So the people in front of me are pissed off. You made us walk this way? But what am I thinking? I'm like, they tricked us. They forced us to get some steps right now. So I'm laughing. The people looked back at me angry, but then when they see me laughing, they start laughing. And then I say to myself, maybe this is where I was supposed to be right now. Because the way I experience this is able to spread. My emotions, my feelings, my good spirit is able to spread. Just like negative emotions, feeling down and anger is also able to spread. But how am I able to do this? Because I can do it internally. And that's what I teach others. How can we do it internally and then come together as a community to support each other?
That's very, very wise, Ty, and I appreciate your putting it in this perspective. I just want to push back on one thing, or maybe clarify one thing. I personally agree with you that a lot of what we're experiencing today is something we have invented. And we thought that this was the right solution, and we got stuck to it, with it. But just saying that that's the reason why we're here alone without acknowledging the loss and acknowledging the grief and allowing people to grieve in a certain way, it's going to be very hard to change, right? So I want to talk about that, the community loss and how we navigate that. I mean, some things could be reversible, unlike the loss of a loved one, right? We might not get the person back. We might get the person back in a different way. Like you have, regained your mom's energy within you, right? Some things may be reversible, whatever loss the communities experience today. But before we do that, it seems to me it's critical that we face this loss, acknowledge it for each other, and work together to navigate it by dignifying people who have experienced these losses. So give me your perspective on this, because to me, that's the loss we have to process, right? Because just saying we're here because, and let's do it differently, is one step, a critical step. But I'm wondering if it's the first step or there ought to be a step before. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's important for us to recognize that we as a people are very traumatized. We're traumatized as individuals. We're traumatized as groups. The things that we've done to each other in history, because we're traumatized, we don't trust each other. We don't trust other groups. And in our lack of trust, we need to protect ourselves. And in our protecting ourselves, we can harm others in our protection of ourselves, And so I've spent time with many families, Jewish families. And one of my clients, he was like, Ty, can you come to my place? My wife, she's impressed by you every time we have a session. She sees you. She wants you to come up and speak to my family. And this happened over the summer. And so like, sure, no problem. Anywhere I'm asked to be, I'll go, because my life isn't really, I've dedicated my life to a mission. And I realized that my life is no longer just my life. I've been put on this planet to do something. And so where I'm asked to go, I go. So I went to the Jewish family's home, and like I said, I introduced myself. They didn't know why I was there. He just like, just come to the house at 7, just come on over. So they came like, what are we here for, right? And so it's me. It's about 10, 12 Jewish families, 3 generations, and I introduced myself the way I normally do, heal the world, right? And 2.5 hours we're chatting, and it was all in it. They loved it, right? And the mother, so it's my client, his wife, his wife's parents, his wife's sister, his wife's brother. You know, it was like that type of group. And so the wife's mother said to me, you know, when you first said you was going to heal the world, I thought you was crazy. I was like, oh yeah, how about now? And she's like, well, a part of me thinks you might be able to do it. I was like, well, there we go. We get somewhere, right? But we mentioned the whole thing with Israel, right? Because she was like, you talking about you're going to end all the wars. Well, how might that be solved? How might that problem be solved? And I was like, well, you know what? Let's just fast forward to the end of it, right? In order for us, let's say if a group destroys this town of another group, the only way for the group that has their town destroyed to be okay with the other people is that the people who did the destruction have to feel it in their heart for the people that they destroyed. But the only way that can happen is they have to heal the part that did the destroying, because the part that did the destroying has a reason for why it did that. It may not be a reason that we on the outside can understand, but that part, they have a good reason for why they did what they did. They have to get to know those parts. And we, as the ones who are the victims of their destruction, we can't help them with that, but their family can. And so once that happens, then they'll look at what they done with sorrow and pain. And then they'll have this desire to want to help fix what was destroyed together. And when they fix that together, that's when the shared humanity will happen. That's when the shared humanity would take place, right? That's possible for our species. This mission of healing the world is going to be such a beautiful mission, because when we start seeing our groups coming together again, former enemies being friends again, right? Speaking about the losses and honoring the people that they lost. Like, I know, you know, once upon a time we had a war, but we're sorry for killing our brothers and our sisters. That's who we truly are. If we're all God's children, many people believe that we're all God's children. What does that make us to each other? That makes us siblings, right? And so if we are siblings, what are we doing? And so as we start to understand what really happens in our own system, how do we grieve? Where does it come from? How do we get stuck in grief? We get traumatized. How can we get through being traumatized, right? We learn the steps of doing that in our own system. Then we can do that on a bigger system. And that's where I'm at now. I'm doing more system-wide healing, right? Going into school systems and eventually into districts and eventually into towns, where I may start in the school, but then I go into the hospitals, and I go into the police stations, and I go into the nursing homes, right? We start seeing crime gets reduced. We start seeing domestic violence get reduced, because it's this new awareness. This IFS awareness, to me, is like a systems upgrade for the human experience and the human mind. If we all got the update tomorrow, the world will be a much better place by the weekend.
Well, I share the hope. We have to make a realistic hope. And I appreciate the fact that you talked about acknowledging the loss before, because if we don't do that, it's going to be very hard for us to help the planet heal.
Right.
And it's great that you come in to try to heal the planet and the world. And I pray that the world is ready and wanting to be healed. So I really appreciate this very powerful conversation and all your deep insights. Ty, I want to thank my listeners for joining us. It's been moving to me. And the topic is applicable to all of us, because grief touches all of us as individuals and across our communities. And from what we heard from you, we are not expected to have answers. It may not be possible to get answers, but maybe just to be present and notice what goes on within our thoughts and in our hearts. If there is an answer, it's going to come from within. We're invited to listen and pay attention to ourselves and one another. It may not be feasible or helpful to rush, the period of grief and hurry through the pain. We may need to experience the pain and resist the urge to rush through it. It is critical that we remind ourselves, like you reminded us, that we need to be in community, that we're programmed to be in community, to be connected, and that we have the capacity to go through this grieving. And who knows, maybe we become wiser, like you said you have been, and maybe even be in touch with our humanity even more because of it, and with those who departed in physical form. I was reminded the other day that we can see better in the dark once our eyes adjust to it. So when it is personal or collective grief that we're facing, I urge all of us to remember that a new dawn emerges following night hours. So hope is around the corner. And if we proceed on our journey and move forward, we will no doubt turn that corner. So having said the word hope, Ty, what gives you hope and resilience at this very moment?
Yes. So last week I did a luncheon so I partnered with a friend of mine, Dr. Chuck Morris at Midtown Biohack. Just look them up. They're doing some amazing things there. And I had a luncheon in their office in Midtown. And I went to go pick up the food at my aunt's restaurant. She's catering. So everything starts off good. I want to be on time and everything, right? So I go to my aunt's restaurant. She doesn't have her key. She's locked out of the restaurant. So she's pissed off and angry. And I'm like, okay, using my parts work. And I'm relaxed throughout this whole situation. We finally get in the place. So now she give me the food, but I can't bring fire to the place. I can't heat it up at the place I'm at. So now she has to heat it up. So I'm going to be even more late, but I'm still relaxed. While I'm waiting for the food to get done, there's a truck. There's a big tractor trailer, and he's trying to turn on a narrow street. Now, when he makes his turn, there's a woman who's parked on a corner, just parked, and he's talking to her because he needs her to move, but she doesn't want to move. She finally found a parking spot. She's taking her stuff out. So now he's stuck. He's blocking both sides of the traffic. People are honking him. He's honking them angrily, right? And I'm looking at this all unfold, and he's screaming in the cab, in the truck, banging the steering wheel out of his frustration for what's going on right now. So I'm watching this happen to him. So I go out, long story short, I go out, I get his attention. He rolls down the window, and I ask him, what do you need? And he says to me, a miracle. Because this person don't want to move. I don't know where this person is. I was like, well, what if he just backed up? He's like, survey says no. I'm like, well, what if I was to go back and block the traffic off for you and then kind of ease you back? He's like, okay, that could work. All right, so I go back there, and I took a few minutes, block traffic off. He was able to back out and go on his way, right? For him, I was that miracle. So I said to myself, well, maybe I was supposed to be late to my thing today, right? But when you ask that question about hope, the reason why I was able to do that is because I was able to see him. The reason why I was able to see him is because I was able to see myself. If I was worried about being late to my event and frustrated like my aunt is, or like everybody else, people calling my phone, if I was doing all of that, I wouldn't be able to see this person who no one else is seeing, no one else seemed to care about in that moment, right? And so that's my hope. When we're able to see ourselves, we can see each other. And when we're able to see each other, we realize that we are one big family. And if we all just looked after each other, if we all just did that, what kind of world we live in? That's the world I'm helping create.
Beautiful way to end this engaging conversation, Ty. Thank you so much for your time and insights. All the best.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Facing the Moment is an independent production of the Foundation for Self-Leadership, a nonprofit committed to bringing emotional, relational, and societal healing and well-being to a world in need. Learn more at foundationifs.org. You can download this and all other episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Until the next episode, may we all keep facing the moment with grit and grace.